Good afternoon, one and all present here. Greetings from Department of English, KLH Hyderabad. I welcome you all to the fourth distinguished lecture series, National Webinar on Text, Textuality, and Discourse. We appreciate and wholeheartedly welcome today's guest speaker, Dr. Amitabh Vikram Dwivedi, for the webinar. I welcome Principal Engineering, KLH, and all functionaries and staff of the university presented here. I welcome all the learned participants to dive into the world of language learning in this new normal. I'm privileged to introduce you to our guest speaker. He is none other Dr. Amitav Vikram Dwivedi. Dr. Amitav Vikram Dwivedi is a university faculty specialized in linguistics and literature in the School of Languages and Literature at Sri Mata Vaishno Devi University. He is a Harvard University certified in art of writing and public speaking. His research interests include language documentation, writing descriptive grammars, and preservation of rare and endangered languages in South Asia. He has also been a co-director for a research project entitled A Comprehensive Study of Culture, Philosophy, Literature, and Language of Jammu and Kashmir, sanctioned by Indian Council of Social Science Research. He has published numerous poems in different anthologies, journals, and magazines worldwide. I'm privileged to welcome you, sir. Over to you.
Sir, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. I welcome you personally to the program. Please.
Thank you. Good morning, all of you. And I'm going to talk about text, textuality, and discourse. There are three things, and I will start with very basic, and then gradually we will move further. We will also see how linguistic tools, they will help us understand a text better. So these are various things that are the part of this session. I'll be dealing with literary theories as well. I'll be talking about linguistic theories as well. So there is the fine blending you will find in this session. And I have also prepared a PPT so that you will have a more comprehensive view of what am I going to share. And I hope you are seeing the slide. Are you seeing the slide?
Yes, sir.
So this is the title. This is the title of this presentation, Text, Textuality, and Discourse. And there is a possibility that a couple of you might have attended my session somewhere else where I talked on text, textuality, and discourse. So there will be a little repetition for those who have already attended on text, textuality, and discourse, but still you will find something new in this entire session. So first we will start with the etymology, and it is always a good start. So when you start a topic, irrespective of the fact whether you are writing for an academic journal or whether you start a topic in your classroom, then it is always a good thing to consult some standard dictionary, consult the etymology. But why one should do that? That is the question. One should do that because etymology or the dictionary always help you in order to get a better meaning of that particular word, a better association of that particular word. So question arises, what is a text? Now, when you pick up any extended dictionary, then you will find written or printed work in terms of content rather than physical form. Now, this dictionary definition is also suffice to make you understand that text deals with quality more rather than the quantity. Physical form means any physical form. So physical form is not important. Hardbound book, a PDF file of the particular book, paperback book, that is not that important. That is not qualifies the definition of what is a text. But more important is the quality, what is written there in terms of content. So this quality is more important than the quantity that we can say. Now, when we attach ity suffix So the meaning of ity suffix is the quality of being something. So when we attach ity suffix after text, then we are actually talking about the quality of being text. So being text means what? That is basically the focus of this session, that how text uh, comes into being. Now, this is one definition that we have, a dictionary definition that will provide you that a text is written or printed work in terms of content rather than physical form. Now we will just move to the etymology, from where this word has come into being. So we find that there is one word in Latin, and that is textus, and the meaning is tissue, literary style. And there is also one word texture from Latin, that is woven. When we talk about tissue, when we see woven, then the concept of fabric comes into our mind. Now we know what is a fabric, how it is made, how it is constructed. So we know that in a fabric, every thread is important. If we remove one thread from a piece of cloth, then the entire texture will get disturbed. So that metaphor of fabric, that metaphor woven, is quite important when we look at text. So in a cloth, in a piece of cloth, or in a fabric, you find a texture. You have different type of clothes that you have. Similarly, you have different type of text. And when I talk about text, then we are talking about like how words they come together. So each word is like a thread. Each word is important in the constitution of a text. And when we study literature, then particularly each word is important for the formation of literary style, because we know that the way a classical writer writes is not the way we talk to each other in our day-to-day conversation. So that language is different, written language is different, written language of a text is different, and spoken language is different, that we also know. Now the question arises that, okay, we have a text, words are so important, words are like thread, and we have this woven metaphor quite applicable to text, but where can we find a text? Fabric we can see, fabric we can touch, we can feel the texture of a fabric, of a cloth. But what about text? How can we see this text? How can we perceive this text? Or where can we find this text? Now, this text actually falls in some context. So, if you want to define a text, then you can also say what comes before and after a text is context. So, what is a context? That means context is such thing where you can find a text. So, uh, there is something before a text, that is context. There is something after the text, that is again context. So these two things are quite important, text and context that we have. So let's take literature, and we know that our understanding of literature is something that is written, though we have oral literature as well, though we have folk literature as well. But our general understanding tells us that literature is something written that we have. So literature has a textual form. We do not have any problem in that. At the same time, literature is also a discipline. Literature is also a field of study. Literature is also an object of study that we know. So we have various courses like MA in English, a BA honors in English. Likewise, people, they do their PhD in literature as well. So we do not have any problem in understanding that. But if I raise a question that you have a literature, but how this literature comes into being, then you will say that there is some language, and because there is language, there is literature. So if we have this analogy that if we have language, then we have literature, then we are implying that if there is no language, there is no literature. So what is more important, literature or language? So more important is language, because if you do not have language, then you do not have literature, irrespective of the fact whether it is a written literature or an oral literature. So what is primary? Language is primary. What is secondary? Literature is secondary. So language provides the medium of text. So literature is literature because you have a language, because it is written in some language, because it is spoken in some language. But at the same time, we should not forget that language is also an object of study. Language is also a discipline. So let's say English is one such language. So we have English grammar. People study English grammar formally. So we have Hindi language. We have different languages. People write academic paper on these languages as well. So we have one concept literature, we have another concept language, and now comes linguistics. Now what is this linguistics? In linguistics, language used about language. That means if you find a linguistic book, then linguistic book is also written using language. So there is a book, let's say English grammar. Now English grammar is written using English language. So linguistics becomes meta language. So these three things are also we need to keep in mind when we study text, textuality, and discourse. So now we have a fair understanding that language is important. Linguistics is again important because linguistics is studying language, and language is primary because language forms literature. Now we will see how this texture is formed, how that text is woven. We have seen the metaphor of fabric. We have seen the metaphor of a piece of cloth. We have seen that a literature has a textual form. But how this textual form actually comes into being, that is the question of inquiry here. Now, you can see on your screen there are two lines from a Shakespearean sonnet. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Now, how this text is formed? Let's take line 1. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? What Shakespeare is actually doing? Shakespeare is raising a question. Shakespeare is raising a question, but this question is not a question of inquiry, but it is a rhetorical question. How a rhetorical question is different from an ordinary question? How a rhetorical question is different from a question of inquiry? You will find that this question starts with capital S. So there is an auxiliary and it ends with mark of interrogation. So at surface level, you find that there is no difference because English questions, they are also formed either using WH or they are formed using an auxiliary. Here we have an example of modal auxiliary. So at surface level, you will find this question similar to a question of genuine inquiry, like what is your name? So someone raises this question, what is your name? And then you will provide in one word answer. If your name is Rahul, you will say Rahul. But this is a rhetorical question, and rhetorical question is quite different from a question of inquiry. How? Because Shakespeare is not seeking the answer from the audience. Shakespeare is not seeking the answer from the reader, but Shakespeare is providing the answer. So this is a style, this is a literary style that, okay, writer is raising a question and writer himself is providing the answer. So we have this syntagmatic relationship. Now, when we talk about syntagmatic relationship, then the founder of modern linguistics, Ferdinand de Saussure's image comes into our mind. So he gave these two relationships, syntagmatic and paradigmatic, these two relationships in his book titled Course in General Linguistics, published in 1916. Now, what is this syntagmatic relationship? Now, as you can see that each word is interacting with each other. So Shakespeare is not saying, I shall compare thee to a summer's day, but Shakespeare is saying, shall I compare? So this sequence is important. It is not I shall, but shall I. This thing is important. At the same time, you can substitute. Shakespeare could have substitute summers with spring, day with morning, temperate with calm, lovely with beautiful. So in place of saying, shall I compare thee to a summer's day, Shakespeare could have said, "Shall I compare thee to a spring's morning?" And still it looks fine. There is no problem in that. That shall I compare thee to a spring's morning? Right. Thou art more beautiful and more calm. There is no problem in that as well. You can just substitute lovely with beautiful, temperate with calm. What is this substitution? Language provides you this facility, that which word should I use or which word should I substitute. Now this type of relationship is actually paradigmatic relationship. So once we have a text, spoken or written, we apply consciously, unconsciously. Unconsciously in linguistics we used for subconsciously. So it's not a medical term like you are unconscious and then you are producing language. It is not the case. So consciously, unconsciously, you are using these relationships, syntagmatic and paradigmatic, when you are saying a very ordinary thing or a very literary thing. You are using that thing. So these two relationships, they fall on two axes. Now you can't see those axes like we have x and yx. But if you look at a page of a text, then you can easily see that okay, there are two axes. How can you find those two axes? Let's take example of the English language. In English language, you write from left to right, all agree. You write from top to bottom, all agree. So you have one axis like x-axis, another axis is like this axis. So you start reading, your eye movements are from left to right, top to bottom. So there you find this axis, and we have a field in linguistics that is known as semantics, and semantics is the study of meaning. So a text becomes meaningful because we have constantly in a play with these two relationships, paradigmatic and syntagmatic. So what do we have in paradigmatic relationship? We have a contrast. If it is summer, then it is not spring. If it is spring, then it is not summer. It's not like oblique relationship. It is a contrast relationship. And substitute. And it's syntagmatic relationship. That means you are following the syntax of that particular language. So I can say John loves Mary. It's quite fine. So you have John as a subject, Mary as an object, and love is your transitive verb. And we know that transitive verb requires two arguments. So John is one argument and Mary is another argument. You don't have any problem in that. So you can say John loves Mary. You can also say Mary loves John, but meaning will change. So combination is important. That means right combination for a grammatical structure like John loves Mary is important. Right combination for Mary loves John is important. But you can't say John Mary loves or Mary John loves or loves John Mary. And if someone says this, then you will comment the person doesn't know how English works. So this combination, the syntax is important. At the same time, co-occurrence restrictions you have. So you know like which verb will go with which nouns or pronouns. Fine. So it's not the case like you say birds fly. Birds fly is fine, but you can't say birds fly merry. You will say, what is this? Birds fly merry? What type of construction is this? So this thing is basically syntagmatic that we have. But these relations are very important. Very important. Even you utter a single word. Let's say there are three words, cat, sat, and mat. And if I question what is the difference in these three words, you will simply say that cat is cat because cat is not sat is sat, and because sat is not mat. So what is the difference? The difference is you will say either the first letter is different or you will say first sound is different. So this paradigmatic relation, contrast and substitution relation, you also find at sound level. At the same time, assuming that you are a poet and you write poetry. And in poem, generally we have this end rhyme. So you are writing as a poet, and the first line you write is "Sun is shining bright." This is the thing that you are doing. The sun is shining bright that you are writing. What is the next line you will write? This is a lovely sight. So first choice of the word bright, because you have used the word sun, because you have used the word shining. So you know, like, bright will go with these two words as well. Shining, sun, bright. So this type of thing is syntagmatic. Sun shining bright, fine. There is no problem. You can't say sun is shining dark. Fine. If it is an irony, then you can say that the sun is shining dark. If you just want to represent irony, because irony is the essence of literature, then you can say. But there must be some purpose for that. Second line is like, it is a lovely sight. So that sight and lovely, that also goes. So lovely sight, it's again a syntagmatic, but the relationship between bright and sight, that is paradigmatic of contrast and substitution. So at syntactic level, let's say the cat sat on the mat. So you can substitute the cat with the dog. You can substitute the sat with the slept. You can substitute mat with couch. There is no problem in that. But you can't say cat the, on sat, mat the, then it will go wrong. So you know that these two relationships posited by Ferdinand de Saussure, they are so important once we look at how a text is formed. So there is one saying, very popular saying by Ferdinand de Saussure, that everything depends upon relations. And when we look at our society, then we know that how important our kids are for us, how important our parents are for us, how important our friends are for us. So when we look at social relation, then this utterance is also okay. Everything depends upon relations. If you have a good relationship, then you have a good life. If you have a bad relationship, you have a bad life. There is no doubt about that. But here Saussure is not talking about sociological relationship, because Saussure was a linguist. He is talking about linguistic relations. And what linguistic relations? Then he used the term sign, S-I-G-N, sign. So what Saussure said, one sign interacts with other sign, second sign interacts with third sign, and this process goes on till sign n. So you can consider sign as a word, any word. Saussure has used in morphological sense that each morpheme is a sign. So a single word is also a morpheme. So let's say you have dog. Now when I say dog, then you hear this sound dog, d or g. Or if it is written somewhere, then you can read that, okay, D letter, O letter, G letter you have. We have a difference between sound and letters, because in English language we have 26 letters, but those 26 letters, they correspond to 44 sounds. So what Saussure says, that one sign interact with other sign. Now interact, it is not a fight. It is not a conflict, in conflict with. It is interaction. So once something is written like John loves Mary, so we have three signs here. John is one sign, loves is other sign, Mary is another sign. Now these signs are interacting with each other, and each sign has a sound or a written form and a meaning associated with that. So when I say dog, so dog, if you are hearing this, then it is a signifier. And if you are reading it, then also it is a signifier. And then you have a concept of dog. A four-legged canine animal is a dog. But there is a possibility that you will not think of this definition, four-legged canine animal. You can think of a street dog, that will become your signified. You can think of your pet dog, that will become your signified. So you have one signifier, but innumerable signifieds are associated with that. And those innumerable signifieds, they are basically interpretations. So what Saussure said, Saussure used a metaphor of a piece of paper. So if you need to define a piece of paper, what is a piece of paper? Then a piece of paper has two sides. That is a definition of a piece of paper. So similarly, signified and signified are two sides of a piece of paper. That means, what is a sign? A sign must have a signifier and a signified. So are you with me? I am still online.
Yes, sir.
Yes, fine.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So linguistically, we see how text is constituted. So we start with minimum and we reach to maximum. That means we start with phoneme, that is the minimum unit, and we reach to the maximum. Discourse is actually maximum, but in pure linguistics, we have phonetics and phonology, morphology, and syntax. So let's say I have a phoneme b. B is a bilabial sound because I touch my lips one time. B, two lips are touching, b. And I have sounds like b, so many sounds, and when I combine them, then I have a word like bats. So in bats, you have two morpheme. Bat is one morpheme, and S is your plural marker. Then your word bats. Then you have two words, the bats. Then you have a clause. While it is proved is one clause, the bats harbor viruses is another clause. And then you have a sentence like it is proved that the bats harbor viruses. Now, what is this? This is like how a text is constituted. So you have a picture. You have a picture of the text, like how text is actually constituted. You start with one sound and finally reaching to a sentence. The difference between a clause and sentence is like in a clause you have a subject and predicate, but in a sentence you can have more than one subject and predicate. So a clause is also a sentence, but not necessarily a sentence is also a clause. Now we move beyond sentence. So we have a sentence, and in syntax, sentence is the largest unit of investigation, of study. But literary text is not in one sentence. Any text is not in one sentence. You have more sentences, and then you have something called a unit as text. So here I have taken this one example from a book titled Cohesion in English, published in 1975 by Halliday and Hassan, and you have two sentences. And you know why I said two sentences, because the basic English grammar tells you that if the full stop is the sentence boundary, or mark of punctuation is the sentence boundary. So you have wash and core 6 apples is one sentence, put them in a bowl is another sentence. So linguistically, if you have more than one sentence and both the sentences, they are interdependent upon each other, then this is the starting point of discourse. Then it is discourse. So here we have an example of discourse. We know that these sentences are imperative. We are just giving instruction, wash and core 6 apples. Instruction number 1 in a cookery book. Put them in a bowl. Instruction number 2 in a cookery book or in a chef show that you have. So these are imperative, and in imperative subject is missing. Like thank you is again an imperative, because we won't say I thank you. I is always understood, recoverable from the context. Example of ellipsis that we have. So that is not that important. What is important here, how the them, put them in a bowl. This anaphor is a jargon in linguistics. Them pronoun is getting meaning. So them is in search for its meaning. Them requires its meaning. How it gets its meaning? When it crosses the sentence boundary. And previous sentence, 6 apples become an antecedent. Antecedent is again a jargon in linguistics. This noun, 6 apples, provides its meaning to them. So if I say what is them, you will say them is equal to 6 apples. There is no problem in that. So what type of relation we have between 6 apples and them? There is a cohesive relation. And this cohesive relation creates a cohesion of the text. Cohesive relation because them is crossing the sentence boundary and getting its meaning from the antecedent. So this is quite important here, that how something like put them in a bowl, it is also a text. But this text is getting its meaning in context. And what becomes the context? Wash and core 6 apples. The 6 apples gives its meaning to them. And when I was telling you about text, that where it falls, text falls in some context. So that means like context precedes text, context follows text. So we have this thing, text, and we have seen that text has a Latin root, and how etymology helps us to find out the meaning of the text. But when we look at the fabric, when we look at a cloth, we have a complete image sort of thing, a coherent image, integrated thing that we have. Or when we look at the etymology, then something that is complete, the completeness comes into our mind when we look at this fabric metaphor. But this completeness is not important, but meaningfulness is more important. How is it so? Because when I use these 3 examples, and I will demonstrate that how meaningfulness is more important rather than the completeness. Now, there is one anecdote associated with the sentence 1, Tolstoy's War and Peace. Now, wow, what is this? Like assuming a situation that you have given a book, Tolstoy War and Peace, to your students. So your student has borrowed a book, a text titled Tolstoy War and Peace, and the student is not returning you despite many reminders that you are saying again and again, please return my book, but the student is not giving any heed to that. So one fine day, you and student, you meet somewhere, and the student greets you good morning, and in reply you say Tolstoy's War and Peace. Now the answer of good morning is good morning, that you already know, or the answer of good morning is hi, or just making a smile face, or just raising a hand like this, or raising a thumb. But how can a reply of good morning will be Tolstoy War and Peace? So this context, because this text Tolstoy War and Peace is falling into some context, and this context makes it meaningful that the reply of good morning can also be Tolstoy War and Peace. Similarly, a road sign, stop, is meaningful when it is a road sign. If you have a road sign and you just put it in your drawing room, stop, then it has no meaning. So similarly, there is a founder of generative grammar, Noam Chomsky, and he wrote a book titled Syntactic Structures in 1957. In that, he used this example, colorless green ideas sleep furiously. And he talked about 2 things. First is grammaticality, and second thing is appropriateness. Now, when you look at this sentence, colorless green ideas sleep furiously, then this is perfectly grammatical. Ideas, a plural noun, sleep, the noun goes with this plural. Furiously is an adverb, and it is adding something to the verb. Then you have a modifier green, and then you have this colorless, this adjective green and modifier. So grammatically it's okay. It's like very fine. Colorless green ideas sleep furiously. But when you try to find out the meaning, that how can something is a color can also be colorless, a contrast. You have an idea, but you do not have colors for those ideas. And even if you have an idea, then ideas do not sleep. Human beings, insects, animals, they sleep. And no one can sleep furiously. You can sleep calmly. You can sleep nicely. You can sleep happily, peacefully, but not furiously. So this anomaly that you find here, colorless green ideas sleep furiously. So again, for the construction of a text, grammar is also not that important. Meaningfulness, context is more important than the completeness, the coherent image that the the etymology provides us. So now we have a fair understanding that a text falls in some context, but it is not any context, not any random context, but a knowable context. So once you have a knowable context, then the text transforms into a discourse. And Bhaktin defines discourse as concrete living totality. Now, what is this concrete living totality? If I say, I saw a dinosaur in my garage. Yesterday, I saw a dinosaur in my garage. Now, you are hearing this sentence first time, presumably. Yesterday, I saw a dinosaur in my garage. And if I say this thing, then you will try to find out what is the meaning. Is the person is comparing dinosaur with some person? Because generally, like, we compare human beings with animals. So is this person is comparing a person with a dinosaur? Yesterday, I saw a dinosaur in my garage. There is a possibility, like, there is a person who is very fond of dinosaur movies, and we start calling him dinosaur, a Jurassic Park type movies. So that person saw that person, or a toy dinosaur, or a graffiti dinosaur. So what you are doing, you are just, when I said yesterday I saw a dinosaur in my garage, you started using all the permutations and combinations of your past experiences, of your past knowledge associated with a dinosaur, a garage, and why that person is saying this. That is actually concrete living totality. And that makes, or that transforms text into discourse. Now the question arises, can text be decontextualized? Yes, all the time. Because we are academicians, we write academic papers, we write books, and we write other things. And what we do, we use quotation marks, we cite people. So honesty is the best policy. You say, like, a talk is going on and you simply say honesty is the best policy. Now what is this honesty is the best policy? Again, a quotation. You do not know who has said this. Like, it's a proverb, like, honesty is the best policy. Tit for tat. Time is money. Hey, you do not know who has said this. That is not important for you. It is serving a purpose. That is more important for you. Time is money. So here, from this very popular text, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, the first sentence, the boy's name was Santiago. So I have picked this particular sentence from this book, Alchemist, and I am just quoting it here. And it is serving my purpose. And this entire thing is decontextualization. It actually falls under some other context. I am picking it consciously, putting it here so that it may serve my purpose, and it is serving my purpose. This thing is contextualized. So if the question is, can text be decontextualized? The answer is yes. Now we have a fair understanding of what is text, context, and discourse. And now there is another anecdote that is associated with the critique, Stanley Fish. So Stanley Fish was a professor, we already know. And once what happened, one student came to Stanley Fish and raised this question, is there a text in this class? So this is a very common question by new students. Is there a text in this class? If my student will raise this question, then I will also understand the same what Stanley Fish understood once. Stanley Fish understood, like, a student is asking for some reading material. So Stanley Fish enumerating the titles of the text. Then the student interrupted, no. Is there a text in this class? The meaning is theoretical viewpoint, that the text you are using, whether you are also using some theoretical viewpoint in order to make those texts understand to me. So what is our understanding for this anecdote, that you have a linguistic utterance. That linguistic utterance is not that important. And linguistic utterance is open to many interpretations. Is there a text in this class is open to other interpretations as well. So linguistic utterance is not that important. Then what is important? Situational competence is more important. So you have context and you know how to decipher that particular utterance, particular sentence, using your concrete living totality. That is more important. So linguistic competence is not that important, but situational competences. And a person who is a well-read can have more situational competence. So we have many interpretations. We have many interpretations of a text, but all interpretations are not valid. So Tiger, Tiger Burning Bright, In the Forest of the Night, written by William Black. It's not important that you say that someone who has consumed the meat of tiger and the person has the stomach ache, pain in the stomach. This meaning is not valid. That someone has consumed the meat of tiger and the person is complaining, tiger, tiger burning bright in the forest of the night. Then which interpretations are valid? That is a valid question again. So we have interpretive communities, but you can't see interpretive communities because it's an abstract term. But you are the part of interpretive community. I am the part of interpretive community. Critics, writers, poets, editors, all are the part of interpretive communities, and they validate that, okay, this meaning will go and this meaning will not go. So they are working as a gatekeeper audience. They are working as a gatekeeper audience, and they are passing through certain meanings and stopping other meanings. So Stanley Fish states that the meaning are already conditioned by the situation in which it was uttered. So what comes first? Previously, we have seen what comes first. Language comes first, yes. Then comes literature, yes. So language is primary, yes. Literature is secondary, yes. But what comes first? Situation comes first. Situational competence is more important than the lingual or linguistic competence, because at one place in Philosophical Investigation by Ludwig Wittgenstein, he states the meaning of a word is its use in the language. That means a dog is not that important, but whether he is a dog, if you say like this, then it becomes more important, that you are using this word dog in the language, not in the dictionary. So that is more important, and that is actually known as situational competence. So context precedes sentence that we have. We have seen that knowable context transforms text into discourse. So we will fall back to context in which we are accustomed to hear such utterances. So our meanings are also limited, despite of very fine linguistic competence, to our contextual knowledge, to our situational knowledge. So when I say someone who has read 1,000 books will have more situational competence than someone who has read only 10 or 100 books. So understanding requires situational competence. Understanding here means finer, deeper knowledge requires situational competence. So if you think like, okay, I know my language better, I am a very good linguistic student, or I know my grammar, then this is not suffice. What is suffice? Understanding requires situational competence. This is the sense that we have. So lingual competence is narrow and situational competence is broad, that we have seen. And words themselves do not determine the meaning, but rather the context, the discourse in which they take part. So dog is not important. A four-legged canine animal is not important. But he is a dog. He is a dog in which context? He is faithful like a dog. That meaning you are conveying. He is greedy like a dog, or he is like wicked like a dog. What type of connotation you are associating? That context is more important. So we have something like, as an individual interpreter, when you say tiger, tiger burning bright is a dietary problem, no one will agree. Everyone will reject that interpretation. But once the interpretation is provided by Derrida, Bloom, or Fish, why those interpretations were not discarded? Why is it so? Because first thing is they were stubborn interpreters. Stubborn interpreters means like who impose their meaning. So it's not the case like Derrida is holding a gun in front of us and just saying, okay, this is my meaning and you need to accept it. This type of thing does not happen in democratic society. M.H. Abrams says that literal normative meanings were overruled by stubborn interpreters who imposed their own meaning. So how come Derrida, Bloom, Fish, they imposed their meaning on us? Because they had finer linguistic, situational competence than us. And once they provide those interpretations with proper allusions, with proper references, then we had no other choice but to accept it. So I will tell you how linguistic knowledge, a little linguistic knowledge, can provide you good interpretation. Let's say there is any random text on your screen. Almighty God, our heavenly Father, who of thy tender mercy didst give thy only Son, Jesus Christ, to suffer death upon the cross for our redemption. Now, this is one thing that you have. The meaning is like God gives his only Son, Jesus, to save human beings, and he died for us. So when I give you this text, you will write this one sentence: God gives his only Son, Jesus, to save human beings, and he died for us. But do you think, as a student of literature, this one sentence, this one line interpretation is fine? Okay. You will say, okay, it is a liturgical prayer. It is a variety of religious English. It is used in church service. But do you think this much information, if you are providing me, it is suffice? No. Then what is the solution? The solution is, if you have linguistic knowledge. If you have linguistic knowledge, then you can find out that, okay, Almighty God is an example of vocative case. Who of thy tender mercy is inverse syntax, inversing the word order, because you won't use who of thy tender mercy. The tender mercy of whom, you can say. Capitalization for father, F. Capitalization for son, S. Because you are not highlighting the biological relationship between father and son, but a spiritual relationship. Then suffer death, cross, redemption, they are in collocations. Topicalizing who of thy tender mercy, because you are talking about God. So at one place you have used God, another place you have used Heavenly Father, and third time you are using this pronoun who. And you are giving more important not to mercy, but who. Topicalization with this relative pronoun that you have. So this information you get once you have this linguistic knowledge. And once you have this linguistic knowledge, then you can write this much. Previously, you wrote one sentence, one line. God gives his only Son Jesus to save human beings, and he died for us. But now, what you are writing, the text begins with a vocative expression that directly addresses God, by which the connection between the addressee and addressed is well established. Because you know that I do not require a mediator when I am talking to God. That is the purpose of vocative expression. That's why vocative expression is used here. Also, the poets, they use substitutions. They do not use the same word. They do not repeat their words. So that is also there. The archaic use of the past tense didst establishes its link, indicating that the prayer is quite ancient and has been used by ancestors as well. So something is ancient is more important. Like old is gold. So like this tradition, this custom has been followed by my forefathers, then that particular custom becomes very important for us. So similarly, we have a substitute of this word. Didst can be substituted with did. Thy can be substituted with you. Thine can be substituted by your. But you are not doing that. Why you are not doing that? Because this archaic use also has some function here. Capitalization is an example of capitonym, which removes it from the biological relations and establishes heavenly connection. The use of thy and thine is also in line with Old English, but it has an alliterative function here. The collocation is well suited for the religious prayer that you have. So as you can see, that when we talk about stubborn interpreters, and they have more knowledge of the language, they have more understanding of that situational competence. So with linguistic competence, you can also enhance your situational competence, because generally people have this habit of reading at very superficial surface level. But this linguistic knowledge gives you a tool to read something critically. Here, critical doesn't mean that someone who is admitted in a hospital and that person is critical. But critical reading here, critical means something that is close, something that is a careful reading that you have. So when we talk about text, then we have another term that is known as textuality. And what is this textuality that we have? Sorry, intertextuality. Now, inter means between text. That is the quality of falling between text is intertextuality. And this term was given by Julia Kristeva. So what is this? That means if you want to try to find out the meaning of a text, you need to move from one text to another. So no text is free of other text. You can't say like this text is one complete text. You need to have an understanding of the text. You need to move from one text to another, because the writer who has written that particular text, he must have read hundreds of texts. It's not the one text he has written solely without reading or without listening to other people or other voices that you have. So that thing that we have. Now there is, when we read text, then another concept by Janet is like architextuality. Now what is this architextuality that we have? So Janet argues that an author conforms to the conventions of a particular tradition. So we have seen this example of Shakespearean sonnet. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? It's a sonnet. And Shakespeare was not the first person who was writing the sonnet. So sonnet as a genre, sonnet as a type of poem is borrowed from some previous writers as well. So this sonnet writing conforms to conventions of a particular tradition. But during that time, lot many poets, they write sonnet. So you have a sonnet by William Wordsworth. It says like, the word is too much with us, late and soon. Right. So you have a sonnet by Milton, you have how my light is spent. When I consider how my light is spent on his 23rd birthday. So that thing is there. They are following convention. That is one thing. But at the same time, they are exploiting the sonnet writing. How they can exploit? Because when we read this line, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Then this I persona, this autobiographical thing, though we consider that literature is fictional, but using that I thing, the pronoun I in a sonnet, that is being exploited by the poet. So this is actually architextuality that we have, a thing that is associated, that a writer writes something in a particular tradition, but at the same time, writer also provides his little input. Like as a researcher, we also do a very little input. We know that we are not the first one who is working on a particular topic, but we also know it is not a copy of a copy. We also know that we are also providing very little input. So in a similar fashion, Shakespeare also made this convention of his own that we have. So this we have seen, and intertextuality, and we have another concept like intersubjectivity. So it's like between subjects. So between subjects is not that important, but between text is more important, that we need to understand, because we have also a concept by Bakhtin, that is dialogism, a continual dialogue with other works. That is more important. And that is responsible for multi-meanings or heteroglossias that we have. So intertextuality replaces intersubjectivity, because meaning is not simply transferred directly from the writer to reader. The writer is saying this thing and you are taking it as it is. It is not that. It is not a transfer of meaning. But when we read a work, then it is mediated through, filtered by codes, imparted to the writer and reader by other text. So those allusions are more important. That intertextuality is more important. And when we talk about this term, intertextuality, then this term synthesizes with Faninadi Sasyur's semiotics, because his study of how signs derive their meaning within the structure of a text. So as I said, like one word interacts with another word, one morpheme interacts with another word, and throughout in a text we have this interaction going on. So something is written on page 102, a word that is also somewhere associated with the other words that are used in the entire text. That is the thing that we have. So we also have a concept like hypertextuality, and a hypertext is a text which alludes, derives, or relates to another work, or hypertext. And this concept is displayed on a computer display or other electronic devices. Then you have a meta text, like a meta language. You have the meta text is writing that reflects on writing that we have. So these are terms, various terms used by different writers. But at the same time, Derrida, of grammatology, published in 1976, said one thing: there's nothing outside the text. And many people, they think that everything is entire one text. Now that is the wrong meaning. So textuality means that reference is not found in external reality. That means if you are reading a text and try to find out the meaning of the text outside text, then that is a wrong move. You need to find the meaning of the text not in that one text, but other such text written in that convention, at the same time that provides a ready reference to that particular text. So it's not like one single text, but the endless hopping from one text to another, to another, to another, endlessly. But at the same time, interpretive communities are also important to ascertain the meaning. So thank you all for your patient listening. And I stop here. And if you have any question or any observation, then you can ask me. And I'm also sharing a link of my Udemy course on literary text analysis theory and practice. And if you want to have a look at this, I'm sharing the link in the chat box. You can click on that, and then you can have a fair understanding of the things that I have discussed and that thing. Thank you all.
So I, Ram Kishore, on behalf of Dr. Panda, Department of English, conveyor of the webinar series, extend my heartfelt gratitude. Yeah, video it's
Dr. Amitabh sir, Lavanya here.
Yeah,
Namaste
namaste.
sir. If I switch on my camera, there's a problem with my net connectivity, so I didn't switch on. I hope you remember we spoke earlier. I spoke to you over the telephone about proposals and uh,
Yes.
yeah. I couldn't. I needed more discussion with you, but caught up with the online, offline classes. So nice having you here with us, sir. Uh, Thank you very much. Uh, I really am going to sit with you or bombard you or be after you until I myself understand. I just started reading Bhaktin. When you mentioned Bhaktin, I wanted to look into that, interpreting the cultural aspects which are myths of Indian mythologies. Can we do it that way? Take it forward. I wanted to discuss with somebody. Since you mentioned,
Yeah,
maybe
definitely. We can discuss
we
that
can do
sometime.
that.
If you want to discuss it, definitely
Amazon.
I'll assist you in that.
Yes, sir. So nice having you here. This is the beginning of the long journey.
Yes.
Professor Panda is also with us. He's at the Hyderabad campus,
Okay.
and the main university is at Vijayawada, Arguntur
Okay.
actually. Uh, how is it going there, sir? Is it still online or?
Yeah, we have sent email to students and those who have like 2 doses of COVID-19 vaccine, then they can join. On campus on 20th of September.
Okay.
So like next week, students will be here, and then we will just watch the scenario. Like if again there is some third wave and problem associated with third wave, then we will again take measures. But right now, we are just following the
The
guidelines
norms,
given by
yeah, the
the government.
guidelines.
Yeah, those SOPs we can. Yes.
Yeah. Down south here we have slight. It's a bit unpredictable, slightly on the rise and then down. Great to
True.
have you here, sir.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
we are also planning one to work on the linguistics area actually,
Okay.
to set up a conference and all. So maybe I'll talk to you over phone, sir, about
Yes,
this. Would the
definitely.
evening?
Definitely.
Would it be okay if we talk in the evening, sir?
Yeah, that is fine. And
Evenings after what time would be flexible for you?
anytime like after 5, if you can talk to me after
Oh,
5
great, sir.
anytime.
Great.
And
Thank you.
I'm also sharing my number for other people as well, because I you
Yes,
have my
yes,
number already, but for other people, like, this is my mobile number, you can save my
yes.
mobile number. And if I can assist you in any manner, then I'll be happy to.
Sure, sir. I'm still sitting on that. My conference that I wanted to do.
Yes,
With this COVID and
definitely.
all, a bit hesitant, but yeah, we are working on it. Thank you very much,
True.
sir.
True.
Panda, sir, I think Soman or Pradeep Kumar.
Yes, ma'am. Present, madam.
Sir, you organized what present, madam? I am present, sir.
What to know? I should thank people like Dwivedi ji, those who are coming, because no, thank you, but no, unfortunately, because no, of the rescheduling of thing, I couldn't make the number today. But we have people are going on YouTube live, they're enjoying. They
Yeah.
are not, and I will be uploading your video on YouTube also.
Fine.
Okay. Because the next seminar is on webinar is an international webinar on 17th, and followed by another webinar on
Yes.
2nd of. And thank you, Amitabh ji, for coming.
Thank you, Nilamadav, very much. Thank you, Nilamadav. I am telling Sivaram Sahu, Kamji
Yeah.
Udayagiri.
Yeah. Namaste.
Sivaram, bhai, namaskar. Sivaram is my good friend. He's a principal right now,
Okay.
principal of a degree college
Yeah,
in Odisha. Okay, and
in Kandhamal district, Ji Udayagiri.
Yeah. Okay, so we are joining everybody from Kerala to JNK, so Jammu and Kashmir. So we are touching almost every part of the things. Okay, thank you very much for that, and profoundly I say namaste to Amitabh ji and Lavanya madam to come in, and all the participants who were here. And let me call upon for the vote of thanks. At,
Yeah, I, Ram Kishore, on behalf of Dr. Panda, Department of English, convener of the webinar series, extend my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Amitabh Vikram Dwivedi, the speaker of the day, for his brilliant, informative, and lucid presentation. I'm thankful for your cooperation and intellectual deliberation, and we look forward to have such great talks in upcoming semesters. Thank you so much to all the intellectuals, the learned listeners for their passionate and active participation, and hope many will join us in the due course of this lecture series. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
okay, I request all of you please switch on your video so that we can take a group photo.
So I think there's one
Lavanya
Pradeep Kumar.
ma'am,
Sir, there's one
yeah,
Mr. Pradeep Kumar who
all
has raised his
Lawrence
hand.
sir, Nirmal sir, Sai Pravat, Upma Behra, Arbati, Pradeep Kumar Garu, Deepu Sahu, and others. Please switch on your video, sir, so that we can take a. Yeah. Lawrence sir, will you please switch on your video? Sibram sir, all of you, please switch on your video so that we can take a group photo. Yeah.
Afternoon, Pandaji.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Huh?
you.
Anda sir, I think there are one or two raised hands. Rafia Zareen has raised her hand.
Yeah. Thank you.
Maybe you should. I think
Thank you, Ilban, and namaste. Thank you, and hope that you will be joining in the international webinar on 17th of this month. 17th we have international webinar, and second we have international webinar. And I wholeheartedly thank Professor Dwivedi for joining us. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.
Same to you, sir.
Yeah. Video off. Switch off the video.